introduction. So as we said, Brian and I met as when he was a member of our Central Coast Writers Branch, and he was born and raised in the Salem, Massachusetts area. I did not know that. It's where I spent my honeymoon. Brian has thus far published 5 novels, including Dreams Are Unfinished Thoughts, a memoir about befriending a drug-addicted rock star, Welcome to Parkview, a macabre cerebral horror novel, and there's also a time travel romance and a supernatural crime noir detective trilogy. Brian also has 8 short stories published across numerous anthologies, and he has spoken at the Library of Congress about incorporating real-life science into science fiction stories, and has been a guest on multiple radio shows and webcasts. He founded and runs a writing group on Facebook, which I joined and haven't yet participated in, but I've joined it, called Fiction Writing, which has over 125,000 members and has won numerous awards for being one of the top 5 best writing groups available online. Brian has been a professional editor since 2013 and has edited over 500 manuscripts for authors all over the world. So there you go, Lenore. Brian currently lives in Fort Belvoir. Am I saying that right? Virginia, with his wife, who is a commander in the U.S. Navy, and their 4 children. He is a retired police officer and worked in law enforcement for 16 years. He is a self-proclaimed roller coaster junkie, a New England Patriots fanatic. I'm sorry about that. And his favorite color is burnt orange. And in 2019, he fulfilled his lifelong dream of becoming the proud owner of a 1981 DeLorean, paid for completely in cash with his book sale royalties. So let's give Brian a hand. Right. Maybe he'll start off by telling us what is his favorite roller coaster that he's ever been on.
So, yeah, I would say, honestly, I tell my kids, having 4 kids, you kind of want to work them up. But personally, for me, the Superman roller coaster at Six Flags New England, to me, is the be-all, end-all. But having little kids, I've worked them through the Space Mountain, and then we work, over here to this, and kind of build them up. But yes, the roller coaster is a huge. There's actually a community for roller coasters, and it's something that I just thrive on. To me, roller coasters. So I would never. I don't know if I would ever skydive or bungee jump. So roller coasters are like the closest thing I'm ever going to come to having that like thrill. But it's it's fun. But yeah, Superman in Six Flags New England is probably my favorite coaster ever. I talked my now wife, then fiance, onto it, and when we got off, she looked at me and she was like, "Never again! What'd you do?" I was like, "Oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever." She's like, "I hate you." I was like, "Marry me." But but that's the way that worked. But I appreciate you guys having me tonight. I did put together a PowerPoint for tonight. I wasn't going to because the virtual. So I did. I just spoke at the Library of Congress, and we did a kind of a hybrid PowerPoint thing, and it didn't quite work that well because of PowerPoints tend to work well when you can have them on a backdrop, and I can stand in front of a bunch of people, and the plot points can be behind me, and I can speak, and people can talk, and we can engage, and I can look up, and I can say, yes, we're going to do that, and what do you think about this, and yes, and go, and we kind of roll, and it kind of fell short during my Library of Congress speech. So I took that into consideration, and I tried to make a new one that might work better for us. And if it doesn't, if you guys are bored, you start falling asleep, just wave and be like, "Brian, we don't care. This sucks." However, so I'm gonna try to share my screen and do a quick thing here. All right. So this is me. I'm a 5-time novelist and editor. These are my 5 novels. Dreams Unfinished Thoughts. I have Moonlight City Drive trilogy. Yours truly. We'll get into that. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so my first novel was published in 2007. So I've been in the novel. What's that?
We're not seeing your slide.
Oh, you're not.
No, you gotta share it.
Oh no, man! I just, I worked so hard on these slides. Hold on.
Go get it.
Go get it.
Oh, it says I'm not. I'm getting like an error message about being in the Zoom meeting. Oh man!
And I made you the host, Brian. So that should be.
All right.
If I need to take it back and then give it to you again, let me know.
Yeah, let me back out and see what happens here. Hold on. Let me see. Hold on. Yeah, I got an error message that said that I couldn't share my screen. Are we sharing now? Hold on.
No.
Oh, gosh. Oh, this is going to be really unfortunate.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yes.
I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes?
There we go. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so those are the front covers of my 5 novels, yada yada. This is kind of an introduction to me, but it was already taken care of, so that's cool. All right, a little bit about me. I published my first novel in 2007, so I've kind of been in this game for a little bit. My third novel was suggested for a Hugo Award in 2016. Now, that sounds like a weird way to say that. The way the Hugo Awards are designed is people's novels get suggested for a Hugo Award, and then the Hugo Awards make their short list and their finalists. I did not make the short list or the finalists that year, but my novel was put up to the board for them to review as like it's like a second round type thing. It's kind of like a wild card round, so that was kind of cool. My 6th novel I'm writing right now. It's coming out this year. I started professionally editing in 2013, and I have edited over 500 manuscripts, which is exhausting. So let's talk about why you should never let your self-edit be the final edit. It's weird how it's doing that. I'm terrible at PowerPoint. I'm good at writing and I'm good at editing, but someone needs to teach me PowerPoint. All right. I'm going to come back to the Zoom meeting. I have this all down pat. Nope. And I'll stay here. Ground slide. Okay. So why you should never let yourself edit be the final edit. I have found as an editor and as an author, because I'm both, I can look at things from 2 different angles. And I have found that because I have an editor, and my editor works for used to work for a major publishing company and then moved on to do freelance. But I've also found that when you write, you can't see the forest for the trees. You are so invested in your characters, in what they say and how they move and what they do, that you don't understand. As many times as you may self-edit, you will never be able to see it how a reader will see it. And that's what's most important, are the readers. And the people who read are the people who review. And your reviews are what build you up on that Amazon algorithm. Your reviews are what build you up on the Book Hub algorithm. And if your readers are saying that constantly that this should have been edited, this should have been edited, that's going to drop you constantly through that algorithm. And it is really, really hard for us as authors to step outside and then look inside of what we've written, because we've written it. So when we review what we've read, a lot of it becomes static noise. And And I say it's kind of like going to work every day for 30 years. So you leave your house, you go to the same job for 30 years. You drive. That drive you're going to do over and over and over and over because you're the one driving it. You've done it over and over. And you don't know the drive specifics because it's become muscle memory. Well, that's kind of what happens when we write our own books. We can't step outside that kind of muscle memory, and that becomes dangerous because readers will call you out on it every time. So I've put together tonight a handful of things that we can look for that after we've after we've written our books, we can go back and we can keep these notes in the back of our heads to change the angle of how we drive to work. We're going to change, and we're not going to make it seem so autopilot, and things are going to kind of stick out at you and go, oh, I wouldn't have noticed that before. So that's what I'm doing with this. Now, I am going to try to... All right. We're going to start with, what's the difference between a dialogue tag and an action tag? This is kind of basic, I know. Some of you might be thinking this is literally basic stuff, but I'm going to tell you, when I get hired to edit a novel, this 50% of the time people don't understand. So a dialogue tag is when a character says something and then does something, or does something and then says something. So you're not using the word said or asked or replied or anything like that. An action tag is something like, Bob swung the bat. Oh, I missed the ball. He never said Bob swung the bat and said, I missed the ball. We removed the and said. And the reason why this is important, and it doesn't sound like it's important, but what makes your writing more professional is we know he's saying, oh, I missed the ball, because you put it in quotation marks. Those quotation marks tell the reader, Bob just said that. So why are you telling me something that I already know based on those quotation marks? Bob swung the bat. Oh, I missed the ball. Was anybody confused? Nobody's confused, right? Nobody's confused that Bob swung the bat and then said the words, oh, I missed the ball. So this is something that helps clean up your manuscript. Using action tags and dialogue tags can tends to point to an amateur writer. And all the tips I'm giving you today are something that agents and editors look for. So if you have a character doing an action, immediately saying something afterward, don't have him say, and then said, and then asked. We know he's doing it. We know they're doing it. And it also applies to the end of that too. So it could be something like, I'm trying to think of something off the cuff. It could be a dialogue and then an action tag. So it could be, hey, turn off the light. And he clicked off the light. You don't have to say he turned off the light. He said, and then he turned off the light. So that's the action tag plus dialogue tag tends to bog down people's writing, and that's just something that we found. I call this History Channel narrator voice. If you've ever watched a History Channel or National Geographic, I also call it National Geographic voice. Think about when you're writing, if you are the narrator and you're watching the lions on the Serengeti, we're watching them, right? The camera's panning. You're the camera. We're panning. We're watching them. That's you. That's your job as an author to tell me and show me what the lions are doing. But then all of a sudden this voice comes on. and we're looking at the lions of Serengeti. Look at them. They're crouching down to hunt their prey. So many new authors want to inject that, what I call History Channel, National Geographic narrator voice. If you've already described the scene, if we already know that there's lions crouching down for their prey, some authors feel the need to then go ahead and then come out and just say the lions are crouching for their prey. And that whole like narrator feel is comes off as very amateurish, very juvenile writing. So just be careful of after you've set the scene, shown the reader what's going on, be careful of stepping back and then telling them again what's happening or what's about to happen. If we know what's about to happen, then there's no reason to tell us. I'm going to get into this a little bit more in a few minutes, but I feel that TV shows and movies are really hurting people's way of writing scenes and how characters react. I'll get into that in a minute. I do need to figure out how to stop sharing. No? Okay. All right, I'm going to... Are you seeing me or are you seeing my slideshow again?
Oh.
Your slideshow.
Yeah, so it's telling me that I can't go back to the Zoom meeting. Like, it tells me I'm locked out. Because I'm only in share mode, which is weird. All
We
right.
see you in the little thumbnail, and your slide is the majority of the screen.
Maybe that's why. Maybe
And the
that's why.
slide is the previous slide. That was the first slide. We've seen that one already. So the format of everything is cool. It's just that you went backwards.
I get it. All
You
right,
have
so
to stop sharing if you want to go
No,
back
it-
to the meeting.
I guess it's fine. I'll continue. If you can still see me in the little thumbnail, that's fine.
Right.
Because I do have notes here of when I'm supposed to hit the next slide, and we'll just leave it as such. So, also too, another thing that can make your writing more professional is if you have a preposition combo where the preposition is acting as an adverb, replacing the combination with a single action verb will make the writing more concise, cleaner, less repetitive, stronger, and sound more professional. I read it off my notes. Basically what that means is there is so many times, and this is not in dialogue. Don't take this as dialogue, because in dialogue there are almost no rules. Because dialogue should represent the way that people speak. And if you have a character from a certain region who is speaking, you should never edit the way that they're speaking. So take dialogue out of the equation. In the narrator part, in the narrative part, verb preposition combos can get repetitive because we so frequently use prepositions. So we look for things to tighten up our writing. So if in the narrative they were saying something as if the firemen ran to put out the fire. Well, put out is our verb prep combo. They put out. We could replace that with the firemen ran to extinguish the fire. Because we've taken put out, which is a verb and a preposition, and we've eliminated both of them, and we've replaced them with a single action verb, which is extinguished. You'll be amazed at how many places in your novel that you can replace a two-word combo with a single, more appropriate and more descriptive action verb. It's something as an editor that I look for constantly. And again, this isn't a be-all, end-all, hard and fast rule. This is something where if you're reading your paragraph or you're reading your page and your scene, and you say, "My God, I've used the word out so many times. Like, he ran out of the house, then he put out the fire." Well, I've used out twice now in 2 sentences. That sounds really repetitive. And I always tell my clients, think of your book if it was an audio book, because audio book audiences are growing constantly. I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't think that audiobooks aren't a viable place to sell your novels, you're crazy. My wife has stopped reading and has only listened to audiobooks in the last 3 years or so. I make a couple $100 a month on just audio, on all my novels being audiobook. More and more people want to listen to them on their iPhones, doing housework, exercising. My wife listens to them when she's, on her spinning bike. But what happens is when something is read out loud, sorry, that's my puppy. When something is read out loud, the listener or the reader tends to hear the repetitiveness of certain words. So on print, he ran out of the house and then he put out the fire. It might not feel repetitive, but it's amazing when something is read out loud how it starts to. So it's a good idea to kind of think, well, can I replace one of those outs with an action verb? Well, yeah, we could. He ran out of the house and extinguished the fire. This is just an example. Not a very good one. I kind of did it off the fly. But you understand what I mean. If you're seeing a sentence or two sentences or three sentences where you have the same kind of preposition repeating itself, there's usually an action verb that we can use to get rid of one of them, so it doesn't sound like we're saying the word out over and over and over. Okay. I'm going to do this real quick. Okay. Oh, no, I did that already. All right. So here's two different ways to say this. There's turn the TV off and turn off the TV. Grammatically, one is correct. Grammatically, one is incorrect. I'm going to give you like 5 seconds to kind of look at them. All right. So in your head, I want you to pick which one you think is correct. Turn off the TV is correct. Because when a preposition, which is off, is acting as an adverbial predicate, it has to come after the verb. That is a grammatically correct sentence. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no way to play around that. So you turn off the TV. So off is not a preposition anymore in this example. It's now an adjective, because that's how we're turning off, what we're doing to the TV. This doesn't seem like a big deal. This seems like a simple little nitpicking, really anal thing. But I'm going to tell you, it is one of the things that's going to separate you from a professional author when you're looking for agents and high-class editors, or self-publishing and looking like an amateur. Any time that you have a preposition that is modifying the verb, it has to come after the verb. Turn off the TV. This is the example that I give most to my clients. But so in dialogue, again, all rules are off, right? Because dialogue, people need to talk the way that people talk. Grammatic, structure in dialogue can go away. I think that's important because all characters should have their own voice. But when you're talking about the narrative in between the dialogue, I think it's important to have some sort of grammatical sense. And this is one of the big things that I always see, how the prepositions, when used as adverbial predicates, don't follow the verb. All right. I hope that this is going to work right. Okay, yes, good. So I'm going to keep that right now. Pleonasm. Pleonasm is one of my favorite things to edit in a book. You're like, what? I've never heard that word before. It's a great word. Pleonasm is fantastic. It is when, I'm going to read off my screen over here. It's when parts of the definition of the surrounding verb are added. You're like, what? A pleonasm is when there is no other way that something can happen, but yet the author tends to still spell it out. Here we go. You ready? See the boy on the left. He is kneeling down. You can't kneel up. It's physically impossible. Don't put the boy kneeled down to talk to his dog. No, the boy kneeled to talk to his dog. It sounds so simple, and it sounds like we're nitpicking, but again, these are the things that will attract your agents and your high-class editors if you do not have these in your book. Kneeling means down. You don't have to put the word down after kneeling. The woman on the right is shrugging what?
Her shoulders.
Do we have to put shoulders?
No.
Shrugging is shoulders are the only part of the body we can shrug. So if you put, she shrugged her shoulders, it is a pleonasm. We've added something to the action that is not necessary because it's understood by the reader. And this is, again, something that untrained and amateur authors fall into constantly. I have a list of them that I have seen. And I'll read some of. These are the two that I kind of felt that I could put as pictures. But I have, he nodded his head. Can you nod anything else? But if I said he nodded, don't you already assume he's nodded his head? We don't need to say that somebody nodded their head. She thought to herself. Well, did she think to somebody else? You can't think to somebody else, right? So that's a very common tag I see a lot. I can't believe I did this, she thought to herself. You don't need the to herself. I can't believe he did this, she thought. You knew she thought to herself, right? There's no confusion at all. I have, she clapped her hands. Now, unless she's going to clap another body part, you don't need to put her hands. Then we get into prepositional pleonasms, which I find interesting. These are things such as, he looked up into the sky. Well, the sky is always up. Unless we're in a situation where the sky isn't up, and the reader would understand that or know that prior. So to say something like the sky, he looked up into the sky, we now have two prepositions side by side. In a double preposition, pencil going to show amateur writing or a non-edited in those directions can be anywhere. So he looked down at his feet. He looked down at the ground. Well, we know they're going to look down at the ground. We don't have to say down. He looked at the ground. If I said, and I wrote in a book, he looked at the ground, would you be confused at all which way his eyes went? You wouldn't. So down doesn't need to be there. We put a double preposition in a row. This is not grammatically incorrect, but what it does is it cleans up your manuscript. And our whole purpose is to clean up the manuscript. We need to make it as clean as possible to remove those repetitive prepositions that tend to just, come throughout. Another one that I have is she had a look of shock on her face, or she had an expression of shock on her face. Well, where else is there going to be expression of shock? On her knee? It's only going to be on her face. So we don't need to put on her face. So that's called a pleonasm. It's when we direct, we have an action, when we tend to want to put where the action is happening, even though it's the only place the action could happen. Again, not grammatically incorrect, but it does clean up your manuscript. Passive voice. And this is another reason why we should not self-edit and be the final step edit on our own books. passive voice creeps into a lot of things, and it's everywhere, and you don't really notice it. There's a rule amongst the editing kind of community, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I'm going to show you this right now. Zombies. If you can put by zombies anywhere in the sentence, then it's in passive voice. That is a good rule to follow. Passive voice means when the predicate comes before the subject. So, Stephen King did one of my favorite sentences is Stephen King trying to teach passive voice, and his example is the donut was eaten by Bob. That's passive voice. Okay? It should be Bob ate the donut. So if you can take any part of your sentence and put by zombies in it, which is kind of an editorial joke, then you know it's in passive voice. So the tree was cut down by the workers, and they brought it to the, they whisked it away. Well, we know it's in passive voice, right? Because we could put by zombies in there. The tree was cut down by zombies, and they whisked it away. So you would say something like, the workers cut down the tree, and they whisked it away. Writing a passive voice is really hard, is really easy to fall into because we speak in passive voice in normal conversation. It has tended to become how we speak and just to each other. And again, I'm going to go back to, in dialogue, passive voice is fine because we speak that way in conversations. So most editors will not correct your passive voice within your dialogue because we speak that way. But if you're talking in a third-person narrative, we should eliminate passive voice completely. You'll be amazed at how many times you can put by zombies somewhere in one of your sentences, and you'll say, "Oh my goodness, that's in passive voice. I didn't even realize it." But the by zombies thing is kind of fun, and it's something that I learned years ago to work on. I don't have a slide for this, so I'm gonna talk about this real quick. There was, or there were are considered filler linking phrases and also can be considered lazy writing. Most of the time, the sentence can be rewritten. So here's an example. There was a chair that sat in the corner of the room. There is many manuscripts I get that are written as in, there was a chair in the corner of the room. There was a boy at the playground. I walked into the room and there was a woman by the fridge. We can get rid of there was 90% of the time. So let's go back to there was a chair that sat in the corner of the room. We can edit that to just say a chair sat in the corner of the room. We got rid of there was and we got rid of that. Here's another one. There was nothing that he could do about his noisy neighbors. I'll say it again. There was nothing he could do about his noisy neighbors. How about he couldn't do anything about his noisy neighbors? Right? We tighten it up. Everything about writing, when it's not in dialogue, again, not in dialogue, everything about writing is we tighten it up. Why do we tighten it up? Why are we getting rid of these frivolous phrases like there was? Because we want the reader to move forward as fast as possible. We don't want to break the tension of the scene. We don't want the tone to change. We don't want the beat of the scene to move and become lackadaisical. Having in the narrative stuff like there was nothing that. Well, I removed there was and that in my rewrite. I've made the scene move faster. The reader wants to be there. They want things to go forward. These are little things that you never would think of. In these are things that editors and agents will see. They will take note of that you've written a story, in this manner. So again, I'll say it one more time. There was nothing that he could do about his noisy neighbors. He couldn't do anything about his noisy neighbors. Boom. It's fast. It's punchy. Right? We're moving on. It sounds good. It's quick. And if it was an audio book, you know, it's engaging. It's continuing you wanting to know what's going to happen next. Here's a good one. Ready? When you're writing, the word that means inanimate objects, animals, plants, etc. Who, using the word who, is for humans, humanoids, gods, ghosts, etc. Okay? There is so many times that I see the word that written to mean people. So it should be who when we're talking about people instead of the word that. So, for instance, we could have I wasn't prepared for a sentence on this. But if you're using the word that to mean directly after you're using a group of people or people to do things, then it should be the word who. The word that is thrown around a lot. Also, whenever the word that is being used as an adverb, it usually can be omitted. I'm going to give you an example. I didn't know that you wanted some tacos too. I didn't know you wanted some tacos too. So I took the word that completely out. It's gone. Right? And the sentence still makes perfect sense. So the rule of thumb with editors is if you have the word that in a sentence, try removing it, saying the sentence out loud. If it still makes sense, you don't need it. That means you're using it as an adverb and it's unnecessary. I'll say it one more time. I didn't know that you wanted some tacos. I didn't know you wanted some tacos. Didn't change the meaning of the sentence. You understood it. It's still there. You got the meaning of it. So that is a frivolous word. Throw it out. Get rid of it. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to tighten our writing. We're trying to bring it all together. We're trying to make it as neat into a little ball as possible in the narrative. I'm going to... Okay. Dangling participle. When I started becoming a professional editor, this was the funniest term that I would joke about. Dangling participle. We kind of would giggle about that. It's kind of funny. Dangling participle is if you have an introductory phrase and the subject is not also the subject of the independent phrase. And I'll give you some examples. So, this is the one that, do you guys follow Grammar Girl at all? Or know who Grammar Girl is?
Yep.
Okay, she's fantastic, and I've actually spoken to her, and she's allowed me to use this example that she posts on her website. For a dangling participle, so here would be a dangling participle example. Walking through the forest, the birds were chirping. Right? If you're laughing, I'm sure you either know this or heard this or whatever. This is her famous one, and I love it. I love it. It's brilliant. So, and I've seen this many, many times in the manuscripts I've edited, that authors have written things along this line. Walking through the forest, the birds were chirping. Okay, so as an author, and again, this goes back to why we should never self-edit the final draft of our books. Because, let's say I'm the author who wrote that. I know what I mean. I mean that I'm walking through the forest, and I hear the birds chirping. I know I mean that. However, we have a dangling participle right now, because what it's saying is that walking through the forest, the birds are now the first subject of this. So the birds are walking through the forest, and the birds are chirping. That's not what I mean, right? I mean that I'm walking through the forest, and I can hear the birds chirping. Dangling participles are such a common error, and again, will put the spotlight on you as an untrained or as a novice writer. So the correct way should be walking through the forest, we, or I, doesn't matter, we heard the birds chirping. Because now all of a sudden the subject of the sentence is we, or I. But that now makes that me has experienced everything that's happened. Because if I don't put that, walking through the forest, the birds were chirping, that just means the birds were chirping as they were walking through the forest. Does that make sense? So we have to be careful about the subjects and where we put them. Another thing that I learned, and which is interesting because I didn't realize this until my third novel was being edited by my editor, and I was starting to get involved in being a professional editor. And this never made sense to me until it made sense to me. Started to or began to should only be used if the action is interrupted before it starts. Because once you start doing something, you are now actually doing it. Okay? Examples. Jan started to wash the dishes. Well, the moment she starts it, isn't she washing the dishes? So if you're writing and you say, Jan went to the sink and started washing the dishes. Well, unless she was interrupted before she could start doing it, she went to the sink and washed the dishes. She's washing them. Unless she's interrupted before the task is completed. This doesn't seem like a big deal. This seems, again, like it might be nitpicking. But through all my experience, these are the little nuances that agents and the high-class editors are looking for. So Jan started to wash the dishes. The moment she starts it, she is now doing it. Jan started to wash the dishes, but a loud noise from above made her set down the plate. That would be appropriate. Because Jan went to wash the dishes, she started to, she didn't finish. Something made her stop. That's where we can use started to. It gives the reader an idea that the character started to make an action, but the character didn't get to finish the action. Billy started to cross the street, then said hello to his friend. Well, if he crossed the street, he didn't start to cross the street. He's crossed the street, right? So we could say Billy crossed the street, then said hello to his friend. He wasn't interrupted during that action. These are small little nuances that are showing up in a lot of unedited novels, and they're being taken note of by agents and editors. A caveat to Billy across the street, I have Billy started across the street, but a bus he didn't see coming struck him. Here, he never made it across the street, so it would be appropriate. The task was never completed. He started across the street, and then bang. Okay? So we have to kind of think about that language. Using past tense and present progressive tense denotes simultaneous action. This is a big one. It's a literary device to help do what movies and TV can do, but books cannot. On TV and movies, when you're looking at a screen, you can see a character do two things at the same time, right? We know we can do that. We can see that. Okay, I can watch a character from a TV show answering the phone and stirring a pot of pasta, right? We can see that. We can watch that happen. But that's hard to do when you're writing a book or you're writing a story. There's a literary device. Books are words in a straight line across the page. So it's impossible to show simultaneous action. Okay? Because books are 1D and TV is 2D. So we lose the option of being able to show those two actions happening at the same time. we would have to print words on top of words in order to say that he was answering his phone and stirring the pot. Okay. So we use this device. The device is past. If you're writing a past tense, you can use past tense and then present progressive tense. An example of that would be he answered the phone while stirring the pot. Okay, so answered is in past tense, but stirring would be in progressive present tense. Sometimes I've been finding that authors are using those two actions that could never happen at the same time. So it's an incorrect sentence. And I'll give you an example. It would be something like, he swung the bat and hit the ball, sliding into first base. Well, you can't slide into first base at the same time you hit the ball, right? There has to be some sort of time that exists between hitting the ball and then going to first base and sliding to first base. It seems more and more often authors are using this device incorrectly, and they're using two actions that can never happen at the same time. And I've seen stuff as, he was hit in the face, punching back. I guess he could be hit in the face and punching at the same time, punching back. But if it's a reaction, there has to be a split second of time between getting punched in the face and then wanting to strike back. So when we use that past tense verb, I walked to the store, comma, and then that ing verb, that means that it's happening at the exact same time. There isn't a nanosecond separation. Does that make sense? One of the least descriptive things that you can write is when a character makes their way doing anything. I hate this term. I will change it 99.99% of the time in anything I edit. Don't make your characters make their way. That shows the reader nothing. You are forfeiting an amazing opportunity to show and reveal emotion by picking the way they were walking. Don't flounder a perfect moment to give the reader a glimpse into your character's psyche or state of mind. Don't make them make their way anywhere. Write how they made their way. How did they go? Okay? And so on the top left, that football player made his way to the sidelines. Okay? Well, what would be better? The football player limped to the sidelines, right? Bottom left. The two men made their way out into the water. How about waded out into the water? Or the bottom right, the couple made their way down the road. How about ambled? How about shambled? How about, there's so many words. We have strode. We have trotted. The top right with the boy in the water, I had an example for that, and I didn't write it down. But I hope you understand what I mean. Anytime you're writing and you use the term, he or she or they made their way. He made his way across the street. That shows me nothing. I have no idea how he got across the street. It doesn't tell me his emotional state. It doesn't tell me how quickly he moved. Nothing. So I love using words like, he strode across the street, which tells me he moved a little bit quicker than normal. Or he shambled across the street. Or he shuffled across the street. It gives the reader a visual that the person, moved a little bit slower. Maybe they're impeded by a bad leg. So that's something else to look for. So, okay, padding the action. How much time do I have? I don't know how much time I got left.
You have about 5 minutes,
5 minutes. Okay, cool.
and then we're going to take some questions.
Good. Okay, great. I'll do this. Okay. Padding the action. Padding the action tends to be an issue that I've seen lately with a lot of movie watching and TV show watching. Authors tend to want to be stage directors for a play and not authors. We don't need to know every single action the character makes. We don't need to know which way they looked. If they looked left, if they looked right. Did they look at this character before they spoke? And look, the word look tends to be the most overused word other than looking verbs like was and were and is. Padding the action is don't add movements that are common sense and understood by the reader. You are not a director giving stage directions to actors. Not every movement needs to be described. This is called padding the action, and it also slows down scenes and can disrupt tension or emotional reaction from the reader. One of my favorite examples was given to me by my editor, who edits all my novels, years ago. She said, in a movie, when someone runs from a house, so we're gonna have the camera. So think for a second where the camera. They run from the house. They get in the car. They fumble for the keys. They put the key in the ignition. They turn the key to start the car. They grab the seatbelt. They put the seatbelt in. They put the car in reverse. They look in their rearview mirror. They look behind themselves, and they back out of the driveway. We see all of that happen in a movie because we followed them with the camera. For some reason, authors are trying to be the camera. So here is 2 examples. This is the infamous padding the action car example. Okay? The first example. He got into his car, fastened the seatbelt, put the key in the ignition, started the engine, put the shifter in reverse, looked out the back window, and rolled out of the driveway. Okay, you all saw that, right, in your head. You saw the man doing that. Now, wipe your mind clean. We're going to start again. He got into his car, started the engine, and rolled out of the driveway. Was any of that confusing? Did any of you not see a man get into his car, start the engine, and roll out of his driveway? There is no reason to pad the action. There is no reason to add unnecessary movements that are already understood by the reader because of common sense, because the reader has done those things in real life. Readers aren't stupid. Don't treat them like they're stupid. They know how to start a car. They know how to back out of a driveway. Don't go through all those motions unless it is for the plot, unless the plot requires it, meaning they didn't fasten their seatbelt, pulled out of the driveway, got hit by an 18-wheeler, and died. Well, they didn't have the seatbelt on, that's why they died. So that is a plot point. If there's no reason for it to develop the plot, we don't need to pad the action. And there is so much that I edit out of authors padding the action because they don't think the reader will know what the character is doing because they're in the mind of that overhead camera of a TV show or a movie. We're not. We're in a novel. It's different. People understand. If I only have a couple minutes left, next to articles and linking verbs, the word look is the most overused word in unedited novels. Any chance you can get to remove or replace the word look, please do it. If they looked around the room, just replace look around with scanned. They scanned the room, they surveyed the room, they something. Because you'd be amazed if you did a Control F on your manuscript and put in the word look, you would be blown away by how many times people are using the word look now in their stories and in their novels. So I try to replace them with watch, scan, survey, this regard. There's a multitude of ways to get around using the word look. And you wouldn't think that it would seem redundant until you hear your book as an audiobook. The first time that I heard my novel read back to me as an audiobook by a professional narrator before it went to Audible, certain words come out at you and you say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I used that word that much. But when somebody's saying it over and over and over because that's what you wrote, there's definitely an overusage of the word. Really quickly, when a word just exists to describe an action, use the actual word and not the word's definition. Honestly, I've edited many novels where something is like, I hit that round, hard thing with a long wooden stick-like object, or you could just say, I hit the baseball with a bat. I've had authors actually describe things because they think they're being more descriptive and more showing by using long descriptions of nouns. Okay, pulling the chain on the thing that lights up the room is the same as saying I pulled the chain on the lamp. You don't have to say lights up the room. And this is from firsthand account of things I've gone through. I want to do this really quickly. This wasn't part of my thing. However, blurbs are the small little tiny synopsises on the back of your novels, or what Amazon, the description that Amazon uses. I just want to give this to you guys really quickly. Never start with a question. Questions confuse the reader immediately. If a reader feels confused, they'll feel intimidated. Try to include your main character's name in the first sentence. This helps establish some sort of connection to the potential reader. Don't use too many other names. Stick with the protagonist and the antagonist maximum. Don't confuse the reader. I'm telling you right now, if you have a fantasy novel that's got 100 different characters, all with weird names, and you throw them all in the first paragraph of your blurb, it's a turnoff. Don't use more than one made-up land or planet names. Do not give away any spoilers. Summarize the first chapter. This happens so often. Don't give away any spoilers in your blurb. You want the reader to be surprised when they're reading it. Don't open with any overused cliche or phrases, right? Like, in a world shrouded by darkness. It was a dark and stormy night. Don't use those. We're way past that point. Try to keep the blurb to 3 independent paragraphs. And the big one, do not use more than 150 words. And I'll tell you why. I actually have some actual data to back this up. Do not use more than 150 words in your blurb. Ready? Here we go. I have personally been able to see a handful of completely different surveys from readers, and the answers are 99% consistent. If the first sentence doesn't grab them, only 75% will continue to read your blurb. Okay? First sentence. 75% are gone if your first sentence isn't good enough. That's a lot. If the first paragraph doesn't hold their interest, 80% stop reading and put the book back on the shelf, or don't add it to the Amazon Star. So if the entire first paragraph doesn't hold their interest, now you've lost 80% of the 25 that stuck with you the first time. Even if the possible consumer is blown away and excited to read your novel, 97% of everyone surveyed stopped reading the blurb around the 150 mark. Let that sink in. Even if someone's interested in your book, only 3% of people will continue reading past the 150-word mark. If a potential consumer still hasn't made up their mind, 94% of people made up their mind to take a chance to put it back on the shelf at the 153rd word of the blurb. Blurbs that are super long turn readers off. And here's the kicker. Books that had more than 150 words as their blurb lost the potential reader that was on the fence. So if you had somebody who was like, oh, this sounds good, this doesn't sound good, once the blurb went beyond the 150 words, 98% of those people said no because it gave away too much. Because the description of the book cost sales. Why? Because authors at the end, there was actually a quote I wrote. They thought the author was trying to con the reader how great it must be in a desperate plea of over-description and nagging. It is so hard for us to summarize our 80,000-word novel into 150 words. But I'm telling you, stick to the 150 words. Because anything beyond that, you're giving away too much, or the reader now looks at you as a used car salesman, that you're obviously trying to sell something that you could possibly, be something it's not. And this was a study that was done over the course of a couple of years. I don't know if any of you know Brian Meeks. Have you ever heard his name? Brian Meeks is considered the world-renowned blurb writer, and some of these figures came from him. But
Hey, Brian.
yes,
I'm sorry. I have to kick you under the table.
yeah, go ahead.
We're going to have to, is there any last thing you want to say before we take any questions?
Sure. Yeah. So this is the website. This is my editing website. The company that I own is Scout Media. That's the website address at the bottom. If you go to that, there is you can look at all the editing stuff and put in a request for me to look at your manuscript. I'll keep it up for a minute. And then that's me. That's my email address there at the bottom in red. Brian@brianpaoni.com. My personal website is just brianpaoni.com for my books. But that's my email address if anybody wants to get in touch with me. And one more time, so I founded a Facebook writing group, which is called Fiction Writing in 2015, and I know it was introed with this, but there is the address for it. It's facebook.com/groups/Fiction Writing Original. We've won a couple awards. We're always listed as the top writing groups on the internet, and I think that's it there, Kimberly. If you want to go ahead and take over.
Does anyone have? That was really fantastic. Thank you, because these are all things that I catch, like you, in other people, and completely miss in my own work. But now, for 15 minutes, I've had it running through my head. How does the chicken cross the road? And I've got like 20 new fantastic answers to that. So. Or why did the chicken cross the road? Sorry. So anyway, do we have any questions from anybody?
I have a question, John Petralia here. Brian, how did you, I'm searching for an agent and a publisher for my children's picture book manuscript. How did you first get an agent or publisher for your first book way back when?
So, interesting. My first book was a novel about myself who befriended a rock star, a real life rock star, who is the singer of a band that had a pretty good following. And when I started writing the book, he had died, he had passed away, and I got the family's blessing to go ahead and to write the book about him. And he had only passed away, less than 2 years before I started writing the book. So there was a lot of interest in the fact that I was writing a book about this man who was a singer of a band who still had a really big fan base, and it kind of snowballed from there. I don't want to say that I joke about it, because that would be really heartless to say, but I feel that sometimes I joke that David's death launched my career. And I had kind of given up on writing at the time, and for a few years, and then he died, and I didn't quite know what to do with the grief of losing somebody like that, and it was suggested to me that maybe I should go ahead and write about it, and I wrote about it. And then it kind of picked up steam on some social media that there was a book being written, about this this band, and their fans got involved, and then word got out, and word got out, and word got out. So it was an unfortunate thing that happened. However, it put me in the right place at the right time. So it's my story and my trajectory into publishing and all this is not the norm, because I had a friend's death who kind of launched my career, and that it's awful to say, so I don't expect anybody else's story to kind of follow the same way.
So an agent found you, or a publisher found you?
No, so what I did was I found a company that would bind my book, like really, because this is before self-publishing. We're talking 2006, right? So there was no such thing as Kindle or Amazon or Ingram at the time. So I found a company in Rhode Island that would bind my book in the most, and I say this lovingly, the most ghetto sense you could find. And then I set up a MySpace page. This is back in MySpace days. So I set up a MySpace page for the book, and the book started selling, really fast. And what I did that was my saving grace was, back in 2006, I bought my own ISBN number for the novel. So every sale of that book could be tracked. If I didn't, I think back to it, and I think to myself, man, I'm so glad I did, because it's something I very well could not have done. But I bought an ISBN number, and I had the barcode on the back of the book. So every one of those ghetto versions of that book that was sold was being scanned, or was being tracked. And I had a publishing company about a year and a half later. And again, this is prior to all the self-publishing craze. I had a publishing company about a year and a half later realized that there was this dude selling these books out of his house, and we had moved like 2,000 units. I'd sold like 2,000 copies of this book. It looked like a yearbook. It was like put together. I mean, and I don't even have a copy of the first edition anymore. I don't even have one. I never kept one. I didn't. I'm so stupid. But I had a publishing company contact me and say, hey, we're noticing that because you have an ISBN number, so they were being tracked. They were like, this is book that sold like X amount of copies in this short amount of time. What's up with this? So they contacted me, and they re-released it. We made it look nice. It didn't look like it was made in my garage anymore. And we re-edited it and kind of put it all nice and neat. And that worked for a while until they went out of business. They were a small press. They went bankrupt, because again, this was before there was really any money to be made in some sort of small press self-publishing. Unfortunately, they went out of business, and I was left kind of alone after 2 novels. And at that point, after my second novel, I decided to go to start publishing it myself. So when they went bankrupt, they gave the option to all the authors they had could either buy their books back and reclaim full rights, or we could be migrated to a different company that they were selling their rights to. And I slept on it, and I looked at this other company, and I said, I think there's something happening in the publishing world. There's some noise happening, and I kind of want to be a part of it. So I chose to buy my books back and went my own route.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll have time for like one more question, unless they're really burning. But we've got to wrap it up. Anybody else? Okay. I can't see everybody, so I hope I'm not missing anything. But, huh?
Can you see the question in the chat box? I can ask it.
Oh, okay. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so what do you think about getting an edit from somebody of a different culture? In other words, in my situation, I'm writing a book about deaf people, deaf culture, and the needs of deaf children, and it's very specific to the deaf community in a way that most people don't know, and that's partly why I'm writing the book about them. And I hired a hearing editor, and my target audience or readership is hearing, but it's been really triggering and difficult getting edits from somebody outside of the culture who doesn't understand the issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, so there's definitely what I consider as an editor sensitive material, and I use that term to mean a wide range of things. And I think if you've written a novel that is by a specific person for a specific community, and those two things match, then I would certainly try my best to get an editor within that realm of that community. And I understand your frustration, and I know it, and I understand it's probably difficult. But I would tell you that your novel or your work is going to be the better on the other end for the little bit more work you might put into trying to find an editor that understands, how the community works. And, that's speaking from both myself as an author and an editor. I've rejected some pieces because I didn't think that I could do it justice, because I didn't understand the content. It wasn't part of that community. So a good editor or an excellent editor will be able to either tell you that they're not right for it, or they'll tell you that they are good for it and be truthful about it. So you always trust the person who says, I don't know, let me find the answer. I kind of stick to that. So I wish you the best, and I hope you do. And they're out there. So I'm going to say just one real quick thing. I'm part of a network of a lot of editors. If you want to email me, I can reach out and maybe find you one that's appropriate, that can work with you, that you might not be able to be in touch with otherwise.
Yeah, deaf people don't write very much because English is not their first language.
Right.
So I gave up on finding a deaf editor, but now I'm almost finished with the rewrite. But I had to add, I put back another 100 pages easily.
Well, I definitely, if you want, get in touch with me, and I have some resources. I can't promise that they're going to go anywhere, but I can at least promise that I can open up a couple doors.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you.
I always say that finding an editor is like dating. You don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid of rejection or to reject. And I agree with you, Brian. A good editor will either know their limits or be willing to extend them and do the work. Yes. If for the money that we're asking. So, I hate to cut this short. You've given us a lot to think about, and but thanks everybody for being here tonight. And if everybody could unmute and give Brian a round of applause, that'd be awesome. He stayed up to, what is it, almost midnight there now?
Yeah, but that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for
Thank
having me.
you.
That was great.
Thank you
for having
so
me.
much. I missed having you at our meetings.
I know.
And yeah, it's not the same.
And Brian, you're still the host, so I kept you on as host. So whenever you leave, then we'll all be kicked off.
Oh,
So
is that
you
what's
have
gonna
the
happen?
you have the
So I
power.
have the
Shit, don't
power
tell
to
him
kick
that.
everybody
He'll stay on all night.
out. All right, so you guys, all right, so everyone's gonna come brush their teeth and get in pajamas with me.
Are you kidding? I've got dinner sitting here waiting for me. So,
All right. So thank you for having me, and keep writing. And
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna log off now.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah, I don't know where my thing went though.
Been trapped here.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I tried to make as little noise as possible.
No, you were fine.